Hey guys, David here. Today I want to talk about an epic upcoming fight between Darren Till and Wonderboy Thompson. I love both these fighters. Darren Till is very technical, very straight punches, subtle footwork. Wonderboy is very bouncy karate, all over the place, changing angles. Wonderboy is actually in my top three favorite fighters who are currently fighting right now. That's including MMA, boxing, anything. So I'm super excited to see this fight and exactly how these two work off of each other. So I'm gonna do a quick breakdown of their attributes and how they kind of fight. Maybe some ways they set things up. Maybe some things that aren't very much talked about and noticed. And then I'm gonna say where I think the fight will kind of go and when what I think will kind of where the fight will kind of hinge. Like what will be the deciding factors for both of them. So Till is very much a distance fighter. He's very much just kind of in and out, but not very quickly. He's not a fast in and out fighter like Wonderboy is. So rather than bouncing his lead foot in deep and then changing angles and then coming out and then just in out like kind of a Sugar or Ray Leonard kind of fighter, he's much more subtle. He'll just step in 1 inch and then step back 2 inches. And what that footwork does is it kind of leaves his opponent unsure of the exact distance. And what Till is doing is he's finding the perfect distance for him to come in or for him to counter. And he does the same thing stepping side to side. Just these very subtle adjustments where his opponent's just at a slight disadvantage and they're going to just barely miss their punch. And he's going to be able to come in and connect with good structure and good timing. And so much of this depends on his upper body and his stance. He keeps kind of a short stance with most of his weight on his lead leg, and his lead shoulder most of the time is directly over his lead foot. And what that does is it lets him be much closer to his opponent than they think he is. They think he doesn't have a whole lot of room. So rather than trying to aim past his chin, they'll aim directly, immediately at his chin. And what they kind of don't realize is that he has a lot of room to move his lead shoulder back and back up. And Floyd Mayweather did this all the time, and so he'll keep so much weight on his lead foot, but when an opponent tries to strike, he'll pull back very, very far. And Conor McGregor does it too. A lot of people compare Conor McGregor's footwork or Conor McGregor's style to Darren Till. And that kind of makes sense because they both do kind of sidestep to the inside and pull counter and use distance management. But I wouldn't say their footwork or even their stance are very similar in regards to much at all. Although they do both use the pull counter, obviously. Darren Till's footwork is very much step and slide. So even though he doesn't get very deep and he stays high, it's very much step and slide footwork with a very sideways stance. Like ridiculously sideways. It's almost like a fencing stance, although he doesn't keep his lead foot directly pointed at his opponent as much. Although he's not even as deep, he's even higher than a fencer's stance, I would say. So that's the elements of Darren Till, is just subtle upper body movement, subtle footwork, finding the perfect distance, and a lot of weight on the lead leg. His punch is very tight, very straight. Keeps his hands low because he's such a striker and because he keeps so much weight on his lead leg. He wants to avoid takedowns. So just like Wonderboy, he keeps his hands low, and he's able that way to stifle takedowns, get underhooks, and maintain his balance. So let's talk about Wonderboy. So Wonderboy is great at in and out fighting, just like Till. At very just minute, small adjustments, just an inch in, an inch out. And using that lead leg to kind of feint and judge distance. So he's a great in and out fighter too. Where he's very much different from Till is that while he can do the sliding footwork, he's much bouncier, much more karate footwork. The pendulum steps, they call it pendulum steps in boxing. I like to think of it as a half shuffle, just kind of in out, but not even off the lead foot, just kind of bouncing his entire body. It's kind of different in karate. And that kind of turns his body with him and kind of dulls his opponent's reaction to those those movements, those incoming strikes. Where he's very different from Till is that Wonderboy is an absolute genius at changing angles and coming in from the side. So while he's good at the in-out distance management, he's also good at getting his opponent open by coming in straight and then just whoosh, you don't even notice it. He's on his opponent's other side. Till can do this too, doesn't do it near as much and doesn't change stances when he does it, or leave himself as open really. because Wonderboy will use what I like to refer to as like a neutral stance, which is kind of like a wrestling term. You know how wrestlers just stand like either staggered or neutral. They stand just kind of straight onto each other. So while Wonderboy keeps that kind of upright posture, his feet, he's not really in a southpaw or in an orthodox stance. He's much more just kind of both feet even, with one foot a little bit in front a lot of the times. And this is great for lateral movement. And while most fighters use lateral movement on the outside, like in kicking range or a little bit past kicking range, just to kind of adjust and change angle with an L step or what have you, or just kind of shuffling around, he really does it a lot more very up close to his opponent, much like Willie Pep used to do, which is really impressive. And by the way, don't get confused when I say the wrestling stance, because he's not ducking down low. Which is something that like TJ Dillashaw does a lot more. He kind of just feints those takedowns from that kind of neutral wrestler stance. He's keeping very upright. It almost looks like he's in a horse stance, like a karate horse stance, you know. And the way he gets there is pretty brilliant. So he'll throw either a 1-2 or just a 2, and then when he throws his 2 or hook or overhand or whatever it is, when he throws his rear hand, he slides his rear leg up to where he's in that neutral stance, and both feet are kind of even, and one's not really in front. And from there, he can go left or he can go right, but he'll slide out to another side and then catch his opponent from an angle, and that'll either, if he moves to the inside, that'll open his opponent up so that they're standing just kind of square to him. They don't have either shoulder to protect themselves, and he could just aim directly at their center line. And if he goes to the outside, that's even kind of worse for them. And it's a shame that Wonderboy's not a great wrestler too, because he could just take the back very, very easily with that same footwork. This is like the Lomachenko angle, where now you're going to the outside and you could just come in however you want to. And your opponent needs to turn in order to stay, defensively responsible, because otherwise they just turn their back to you. I mean, it's not boxing. You can't do what Mayweather did against McGregor when he got his back and just kind of like turn around and then wait for the ref to kind of break you up, which is illegal, but he got away from it with it a lot during the fight. And not that is entirely on Floyd, because McGregor could have easily sidestepped and attacked him from the side instead of taking his back each time. Regardless, moving on, what was the point I was gonna make? Oh, the best thing, the coolest way that Wonderboy does this is he uses this footwork to set up his kick, his rear leg round kick. So what he does is he'll come in with his 2 and then step out to the inside and slide his rear leg up. And so now he's in a much more neutral stance, and his right leg is very, very close to his opponent's jaw. And he just comes in over his opponent's guard and over his opponent's shoulder. So he could maybe throw his 1, step out a little to the inside, then he throws his 2, slides his rear foot up, and now his foot is very close. His rear foot is very close to his opponent's lead foot. So that kick is at a perfect angle to just come up over his opponent's head and then slam down on his jaw. So now that we've just kind of gone over both fighters' styles a little bit, both not like, they don't rely on their wrestling. Wonderboy is very vulnerable to wrestling. Till's better at it, I'd say, but it's still not his like forte, and I don't see a major advantage going to either side, especially because Wonderboy is so great at stifling those takedowns in his defense, and he's very hard to catch because of his footwork. I'd say he's much harder to catch than Till, because he's just all over the place, and by the time you even think of going for a double leg, he's already out of the way. So let's kind of compare them to each other now. So I think that Till's major vulnerability, because of his kind of fencer stance, is definitely going to be his lead leg. And Wonderboy definitely made a mistake with Woodley by using a rear leg round kick and kind of bringing it up high. And I think he could have done much better relying on his kind of pendulum lead leg round kick. So this is where he stands with his right leg in front, and he just what the pendulum kick kind of is you put a lot of weight onto your lead leg, and then you just kind of replace. You want to think of replacing your front foot with your back foot. So if you imagine that you're leaning forward, your hips are kind of back, you just swing your hips forward like a pendulum, and you don't really need to shuffle or step or any of that. It's the benefit is that it's all one motion. And I think that it doesn't do a lot of damage, but I think if Wonderboy aims at Till's below his knee, and he'll just knock him. He'll just mess up his balance. That's what the kick does. If you hit below the knee, if you hit to kind of like the shin or the ankle, it's just like a little pestering kick. But if all of your weight is on your lead leg, then it makes it very, very difficult to come in. If every time Till steps in, Wonderboy just pendulum kicks him below the knee, he's gonna be off balance. He's not gonna be able to set up any kind of moves, and eventually his legs are gonna get really, really sore, and he's gonna lose a lot of his movement. So I think that's a major vulnerability for him. I think another vulnerability is how Wonderboy could come in from the side, like I just said, and just kind of attack him from these different angles that he's not used to. That being said, Wonderboy, like Till, keeps his hands low a lot, and Till has shown he has incredible accuracy, but beyond that, he's great at tracking his opponent's movement. So he's not just the kind of fighter who can only set up strikes off of predetermined patterns. He'll pick up on patterns, but it's not really a pick up on head movement and read his opponent kind of thing. It's much more he's very good at seeing where his opponent's head is going and then following that line to attack. So because Wonderboy likes to use head movement so much when he's throwing his strikes, that's usually enough to keep him safe. It wasn't with Woodley. Woodley's great at tracking shots too, and I don't think it can necessarily be enough with Till, because I think if Wonderboy moves off to the inside or the outside, he might just find that Till has pivoted on his lead leg to follow him, or that he's sidestepped out to follow him as well, and that he's able to track his head movement and then just connect with his chin. And I think if Wonderboy kept a guarding hand up when he did this, if he could just drill that enough to keep one guarding hand on his vulnerable side, especially when he's moving to his opponent's power side, that it'd be incredible for him. He'd stop getting, Woodley would not have had as much success if Wonderboy had just kept his hand up when he moved to the power side, and that was the only adjustment he made. He would have done much better in both fights. So that would definitely be worthwhile for him, because I think Till definitely has the accuracy and the timing and the speed to be able to catch him as he moves to the outside. I think, though, if Wonderboy just targets that lead leg and then picks his shots, I think Till's going to have a very difficult time. And I think Till's going to have a hard time following him and cutting off the ring as well. So Wonderboy just needs to maintain distance and then cut angles when he wants to cut angles. And Till wants to be able to keep in striking distance with Wonderboy, because if he lets him keep that distance, it's over, and he wants to be able to counter Wonderboy when he comes in at those odd angles. So I think that's where the fight's going to go. I could be wrong. Till could try to make it a wrestling match, but I don't see either fighter doing that. Till really wants to build up more fans and rise to the top and get those big fights. And so I think he's going to keep this on his feet unless he really feels that he's losing badly. And even then, I'm not sure about it. So that's just kind of how I feel about the fight. That's how I think it's going to play out. That's how I think both fighters are going to kind of go in and go about it. Speaking of, I know I've talked about this before, but I'm just so annoyed that Wonderboy doesn't sidekick to the lead leg, or oblique kick, they're calling it now. I don't get why he does an oblique kick to the lead leg, because his sidekick is so good at maintaining distance for him and keeping him at kicking range. He likes to come into punching range from kicking range too, so everything he sets up is from a very long distance. And it's not a big risk because it's a linear kick, but it's a much bigger risk to attack his opponents with a side kick to their sides, and he has to wait for them to raise their hands so there's room to target their ribs, or he has to wait for them to square up. So it's much riskier, and it's much harder to land the sidekick to the opponent's ribs or to their gut. I think if he just focused on his opponent's knee, it'd be so insane. He'd be much more dominant than he is now, and I think it would have worked much better for him with Woodley too, who also likes to keep a lot of weight on that lead leg. Although I'd say definitely not as much as Till and not as in his highest stance. So Yep, that's it for today. Hope leave your comments below. Let me know if you think I was wrong, if you think I was right, if there was anything I didn't mention that you think would be a major vulnerability to either fighter, and I'll be sure to have a breakdown for you guys in the next couple days. Yeah, that's it for now. So happy training.